Yeah, g'day. So, as many of you would be aware, particularly those of you who are, in the same wheelhouse as I, looking at fascist dead shits, there's been a bit of movement at the station last night. Channel 9's A Current Affair released a piece on Tom Sewell and the National Socialist Movement, formerly Lad Society, lads. And he didn't like it. And he went along and he beat up a security guard. So we're going to go through that. I'm going to go through the piece first of all, do a bit of a commentary, and then afterwards we'll have a look at the coverage, I suppose, the assault itself, and the coverage from Tom Sewell. Big trouble in Pioneer Little Europe. That's a little joke there for anyone as familiar with white supremacist stuff. 10 of you. Anyway, let's get going. A current affairs piece on the neo-Nazis of the National Socialist Network.
Hello, I'm Tracy Grimshaw. Welcome to A Current Affair. First tonight, the hate groups spreading neo-Nazi propaganda and promoting extremism in our own backyard. We're about to take you inside the gangs in our suburbs and cities as the government moves to declare some far-right groups as terrorist organisations. Once you see what our investigation has uncovered, you'll understand why.
Yeah, so I first came across Tom Sewell in various videos. He would tag along as Blair Cottrell's number 2, a bit sheepish, very awkward. And in more recent interviews, Tom Sewell would describe his time in the UPF post to Reclaim Australia in 2015-16 onwards as being a time of him, hiding his neo-Nazi politics, which is what we always said about it at the time. We were right. And, just seeking other Nazis he could, sort of secretly try and ship his Nazi politics along with. So, he would do interviews and he would do speeches and he would talk about the importance of white Europeans banding together against the menace of Islam. But he never gave a shit about Islam. He always gave a shit about the Jews. He is a conspiracy theorist at heart. He was always a very awkward, charmless person. Now he's an awkward, charmless person who's been studying Adolf Hitler speeches for some years, and he does a better impression of being a compelling, charming leader than Blair Cottrell ever did. But anyway, this is him. That's Tom Sewell there. Very nice.
These homegrown extremists are ticking time bombs.
We were on that side of the lake having dinner, and then the whole group was yelling Ku Klux Klan all over and over and over again.
When German national Saskia Alling moved to Victoria, this is the last thing she thought she'd encounter.
We heard them starting to yell Heil Hitler.
Now, see, these guys go on many bushwalks, but this was different. This had more people at it, intentionally, we believe, and they were deliberately agitating as many locals and bushwalkers as they could, with the express purpose of using all of those locals as promotion. Because they can't really promote publicly on mainstream social media channels, so they use the media to do it for them.
It's the Australia Day weekend, and a group of neo-Nazis is camping illegally at the foot of the Grampians National Park in Western Victoria.
The other side of the lake is where people, like families, go for dinner, and like all kinds of backgrounds, and everyone's welcome here.
Around 40 white men linked to the so-called National Socialist Network.
So just to clarify the concept of what we have here, we have two separate groups now. They have the European Australian movement, which is led by Tom Sewell, and that's meant to be like, I suppose, a parent or a big boys group shepherding the youth recruitment component, which is the National Socialist Network, which, as I understand it, is headed up by one young man called Jacob Hersant. Who's he's a young boy who had a bit of a fascination with Nazi Germany stuff, and he was groomed at a very young age by people like Tom Sewell to join these groups. And if you look at that construct, there's some older men, apparently a couple of sort of, sub-boomers there, but mostly they're very young. Tom Sewell's main wheelhouse is in recruiting and grooming very young boys, because he can mould those little boys to agree with his aberrant worldview.
Through the mountains, some are wearing army fatigues and all are covering their faces. They burn a cross, raise their arms in Nazi salutes and record this video.
They don't share a great deal in common with the Ku Klux Klan per se, but they know that most people associate that with white supremacist organised racism. It's burned into the popular consciousness. They were doing it. It was a marketing angle that they knew would be projected by the mainstream media, and most people would pay attention to it.
A nod to a hate group whose white supremacist agenda inflicted terror across the United States. Saskia and several others called police. Officers from the state's counter-terror...
They did all the Hail Hitlering and white powering at other people in order for them to do things like call the media and call the police.
The command promptly called back, asking them to take photos.
People were shocked and not okay with it.
But it's what happens next in nearby Hall's Gap that beggars belief. A number of residents have detailed watching this group march through town chanting white power. Many locals are too terrified to speak on camera, fearing retribution, but say they hope to never see this mob here again.
They were doing the Hitler salute to people in town, to just randoms, to everyone who walked past them.
Yes, we were hailing Hitler. We were. Adolf Hitler is the greatest man to have lived in the last 2,000 years. And that's why we say white power.
Tom Sewell is someone who believes in a occult Hitlerism to no small extent, pioneered by a race shifter, an Italian woman who pretended to be Indian. It's a long story. Named Savitri Devi. In the wake of World War II, she was the first to really champion the idea that that Hitler was again the greatest man in 2,000 years, and someone called the man against time. She had this. She lifted this idea from Hindu, called the Hindu religion called the Kali Yuga. The idea, the concept that we're in an age of destruction. But in her words, that age of destruction was brought about by commies and Marxists and gay people, things like that. And she suggests that this is time had marched us forward into this age of destruction. We're in the middle of it, and that Adolf Hitler was this man against time, an extremely rare category of person who's come to reverse the devastating effects of the Kali Yuga and bring us back into a golden age of light. So that's the kind of shit praying to Hitler and such, and essentially, he doesn't literally pray to him, but he does treat him as a god-type figure. And that's the kind of hodgepodge of pseudo-spiritual shit that kooks like this, believe in, and get the very young boys that they groom into their groups to believe in. Okay, so you've got this man, Tom Sewell, grooming 13 to 16-year-old boys, who presumably are hiding this from their parents. He's grooming them to believe in this kind of shit.
The Nazi movement just has no place in Australia.
And this guy in particular has always cherished the idea of a counterbalancing far-left extremist figure, even if that figure doesn't really exist in reality in Australia. I don't know any Molotov-flinging anarchists. Sort of cartoon anarchist black bloc boogeyman. That doesn't really exist in Australia. Mostly you just got people like me being fucking pests, yelling at racist dogs, talking about fascists, liaising with each other, talking about them, letting the community know what kind of assholes abound, like Tom Sewell. That's most of what goes on here. However, when you're Peter Dutton, what you really, really benefit from is having a fake counterbalancing far-left extremist figure so that you can distance yourself from the whole thing. The reality is that since the Stop the Boats campaign of 2014, and then when Abbott was deposed a year or so after that, you really saw the rise, and it was no coincidence, you saw the rise to replace that mainstream sentiment of grassroots nationalist groups. It's really this fucking government's fault that this thing was as successful as it was. Tom Sewell himself said in a podcast interview not too long ago that he himself, as a fascist, regarded the Stop the Boats campaign as fascist propaganda. He agreed with the lefties who were saying that it was fascist propaganda. So the people like Peter Dutton were around. They've been in the administration in various forms since that time. So for this cunt to sit there and try and wash his hands of it and sort of, wax concerned about it is the height of fucking hypocrisy. But go on, Peter, let us know how seriously you take this problem, mate.
Peter Dutton is Australia's Home Affairs Minister.
Kids and adults can be turned very quickly and become martyrs for these causes.
A Current Affair has obtained access to encrypted chat rooms where the National Socialist Network is actively hunting recruits vowing to...
You just go onto Telegram and you look at their channel. I mean, they're not hiding per se. They're just not allowed on bigger platforms. But, it's not much gets banned off Telegram, so that's why they're all on there.
To impose a white revolution and destroy the modern world. Members as young as 16 pose at major landmarks and roam Australian universities, leaving behind a trail of racist propaganda. They gather in broad daylight in suburbs and cities across the country, and experts fear there may be dozens more similar groups lurking in the shadows.
They dream of Australian Hitler.
Dr. Divya Abramovich is one of the country's leading anti-hate campaigners.
Divya Abramovich is someone who always gets asked whenever any far-right group does anything. Divya is always the go-to guy for a thing. Look, I think he plays his role well enough, in this. He's a respectable, besuited man who can generally wax concerned about these groups, I think he actually does quite a decent job of playing that role in this show. Sometimes I'm not sure how much Divya actually knows about the up-to-date goings-on of these groups. But also, I think there's a broader question of how white supremacy works and the effect it has on, say, Jewish people, Holocaust survivors, and marginalised groups of people, the people that they target. And I think that stuff rarely changes over the years. So I think in that sense of being that respectable figure, he's useful in the context of this show. I'm just, I don't know if you get cutting edge analysis from the far right from him, but you don't necessarily need it here. And Tom Sewell's hardly doing anything cutting edge here. In fact, he's going back to a very basic neo-Nazi fascist messaging here. There's none of this reinvented anti-Islam messaging of the UPF. In fact, he's really stepped back a notch and he's gone back, okay, let's just go back to classic ye old, white enclave, white revolution, Jews done it type thing. Divya's useful in that sense. Anyway.
The danger here is that a lone individual soaking up all this propaganda and all this poisonous incitement may become convinced that the white race is dying, and this is a cause worth fighting for and worth dying for.
We don't work with we don't work with non-whites. We don't work with
This man, Aussie Thomas Sewell, is one of the leaders.
We're not asking anymore. We're not asking for your permission to do what we're doing. We're going to do it.
While Thomas claims online his group denounces violence, experts believe it's only a matter of time before far-right outfits inspire someone to commit an act of terror.
Yeah, so here's the thing, Tom Sewell's in a race, and this is the game plan. He's said this several times in lengthy interviews. If you have the time to sit down and listen to hours worth of him talking to neo-Nazi podcasts and stuff, then you can learn this for yourself. But otherwise, I'll just tell you. So he's in a recruitment campaign, and it's a non-violent one. It's just using the media for effective stunts right now, okay? Now, the January 26th bushwalk in the Grampians was a very effective stunt because it had the media all up in arms going, oh no, neo-Nazi groups are bad. Meanwhile, they could just go, well, it's just some white men going on a bushwalk. And that effectively acts as a good campaign for them. Yeah. He's in a race against time to recruit as many 16-year-old boys as he can, young little boys that he can groom into his worldview, because once you have enough numbers in your group, then intelligence services have to change the way that they treat you. This is why he says, and I'm inclined to agree with him. I'm also inclined to think that he's probably had advice from people with intelligence experience. Once you have 1,000 people, they can't shut you down, prescribe you as terrorists in the same way that they might when you've only got 50 people. So he's in a race against time to use as many viral stunts via the media, who are happy to signal boost the shock stunts that they'll do. He's in a race to recruit as many people through that method as possible before this group gets prescribed as a terrorist org. So that's the ostensibly non-violent basis on which they work. The problem with that is that they're conspiracy theorists who believe in a very pro-violence and apocalyptic series of conspiracies, and they champion and laud violence among each other, often to their own detriment. And that's what we're going to get to later. What he did, the violence that he did, with regards to the show, is actually to his own detriment. But he couldn't help himself. He did it anyway. So they say that they're non-violent, but they are not to be trusted. You know, they will not act in accordance with their stated principles, because their stated principles aren't their real ones. And this level of dishonesty is something you really have to come to terms with. You're going to look at these sorts of fascists. They will never tell you what they really mean or intend to do, because they're not even really telling themselves and each other.
They want you to believe that it's just banter, it's perfectly within the guidelines of free speech, or it's, just a little bit of political talk. They want you to believe that, and in fact, that's how they attract people to their cause, who then go down this rabbit hole of radicalisation.
The threat is serious, increasing and evolving.
That reminds me of a Chris Morris bit.
Australia's spy agency ACO, which says right-wing radicals now occupy up to 40% of its counter-terror workload.
See, I'm pretty sick of this fucking stat, particularly because their other 60% of their workload is probably, whenever they do get this 40%, they start looking for a made-up, counterbalancing, far-left extremist cartoon character. Everything I've heard of ASIO chasing down people on the left over the years has always seemed to involve them going, oh yeah, okay, so alright, yep, so someone's threatened to kill you. Well, do you happen to know of any anarchists out there who might have had any? They do the same thing that Peter Dutton does, which is operate under the assumption that there must be a face mask clad, black bloc, Molotov wielding anarchist that caused the Tom Sewells of this world to be as radical as they are. And it's not only unhelpful to do that, but it's completely dishonest, because its main intention, that lie, is to absolve the government from responsibility by saying, it's the far left's fault.
In suburbs around Australia.
So I don't give a fucking shit about their 40% counter-terrorism workload. Fuck them.
All cells meet regularly, salute Nazi flags, inspect weapons,
They meet regularly to salute Nazi flags,
train in combat and share their hateful ideology.
ASIO boss Mark Burgess in an interview last year.
And sadly, these groups are more organised and security conscious than they were in previous years.
Terrorism today isn't like a hierarchical structure with a base and a spiritual leader like you had with Al-Qaeda, for example, or even with ISIS. Terrorism today is carried out by individuals who have no formal kind of attachment or formal affiliation to a particular group.
Well, that's a very nice thing to say, and that's NLE, the politician. But that's not really relevant to here, because in this case, Tom Sewell and the National Socialist Network and Jacob Hersen and what have you, they definitely are attached to a group. and they are being groomed by someone with a very, very strong messaging, and basically who's fashioning himself as a fascist leader. So that's not really relevant. Anyway, I understand they've got to get guests in who are a bit prominent. Anyway, Brenton, our old mate Brenton Tarrant.
In 2019, we watched in horror as New South Wales terrorist Brenton Tarrant
Look at this fucking Neanderthal-looking motherfucker. Anyway.
slaughtered 51 worshippers in Christchurch. Online, he'd been interacting with Australian extremist groups.
It is not beyond that.
Yeah, so Tom Sewell once asked him to join the Lad Society, and he didn't do so. He instead went to New Zealand and did the Christchurch massacre. And in a later interview, Tom Sewell said that they would, do the same thing as Tarrant if they weren't allowed to operate peacefully as an organisation.
Unimaginable that we will have a Christchurch in our very backyard.
We've had people arrested who have been radicalised by far-right groups.
Including forklift driver Philip Galea, who was recently jailed for planning to blow up buildings occupied by leaders of the left. While in New South Wales, after police monitored online chatter, an 18-year-old accused neo-Nazi was charged, allegedly expressing a desire to carry out an act of terror.
A couple of days.
That's Tyler. He did say something about how, I'm going to commit a national tragedy or something. I don't know. And then, and Tom Sewell and all that say, he was just shitposting. They all think that Brenton Tarrant was shitposting when he did the actual Christchurch massacre. So you really can't believe anything that they say.
What we observed was an escalation in the tone, which went to a support of a mass casualty event and potentially his involvement in that event.
And just last week in Perth, officers say a man with a swastika on his forehead used a makeshift blowtorch to randomly attack a mother and daughter in the middle of the street.
The mad thing about that was that 3 kids took him down outside a shop, apparently. And apparently he had a chain. I don't know the details yet. I could be wrong about some of these. Apparently he had a chain and was trying to fend them off. They didn't let him off, and they fucking grabbed him. They put him to the ground. And citizens arrested him, which I just fucking... You love to hear it. You love to hear it,
Abramovich is chairman of the Anti-Defamation Commission, an advocacy group that monitors anti-Jew incidents.
Ranging from heartbreaking bullying of Jewish students to physical and verbal assaults, anyone wearing the Nazi swastika or flying the Nazi flag is plunging a knife into the hearts of every Holocaust survivor and spitting on the grave of those Aussie diggers who fought to defeat Hitler's evil regime.
Just weeks ago, this man was snapped where...
They always say, look, if you go out there and ask the average white tradie out there, average white bloke in the factories or on the building sites out there, then he'll agree with most of what we say. If you just take out the Nazi part of it, you just explain what we stand for, and you say that the white race is dying out and we just want to save the white race, then he'll agree. They'll agree with everything we say. So that's something that's very fundamental to their mythos, whatever. But then again, it doesn't take much convincing to people that it doesn't take much reminding to convince people that Nazis are all that bad either. And so when you get a real normie whisperer show like A Current Affair involved, you can see that is a threat to their desired narrative about how, white blokes would all get on board with us if we could just talk to them, you know what I mean? If they realise that we just cared about their future.
Wearing a swastika armband at a Melbourne market, the same vile symbol we found on display in this backyard. De Vere has long been campaigning for Nazi symbols to be outlawed and far-right outfits be declared terrorist organisations.
It would allow law enforcement to seize and suspend any bank accounts or properties that they have, but also to prevent them from gathering, from recruiting, and from holding rallies.
It's something the federal government has been relying.
Yeah, look, this question of whether they should all be outlawed and what have you, it's not something I really like to I suppose, really even weigh in on. Or certainly not agitating for it. You know, I suppose my ideal vision of an anti-fascist Australia is one in which we all intuitively go, no, fuck you. You know, we don't stand for you. We don't want you trying to make a white enclave in our towns. We don't want you being divisive, violent pests in our suburbs. We don't want you in the gym organising down the road. We don't fucking want you anywhere. And they essentially sort of have to disperse or hide in the shadows. That's the way it's been for some time. Certainly was in the past. This is the kind of the vision of the society that we really want. And that doesn't really involve going, oh, big daddy government, can you please make everything illegal? This is also one of the greatest dangers that Sewell and the National Socialist Network face. It's that they will be prescribed, and they know that, you know what I mean? Again, in these many neo-Nazi podcast interviews that I listened to not too long ago, he describes that as the greatest danger, and that's why he's got to recruit lots of people before they get prescribed, you know, as a terrorist organisation, so that they're a very large group. And that's why he can't afford to do anything silly like attacking security officers. Anyway.
Reluctant to do until now, planning to declare the first right-wing group a terrorist organisation.
Well, I can tell you for the first time here, because we haven't made this public yet, but Shannon Krieg is the organisation.
Shannon Krieg down the road. He's talking about Sonnenkrieg, related to the Atomwaffen division. Some of these organisations don't really even operationally exist anymore. But anyway, okay.
And they have a presence that we're particularly worried about in the UK, but their reach goes into the minds of young people and Australians here. And if there are other organisations that need to be listed, ASIO will consider those matters.
Federal Labor MP Dr Anne Alley is a counter-terror expert and member of the Parliament's Security Committee, which is currently holding an inquiry into extremism.
It would look at things like the online space, the social media space. What role does that play in radicalisation?
And those encrypted platforms is what's making it so hard for authorities to disrupt extremists, who police say have exploited COVID lockdowns to radicalise Australians as young as 13.
The internet now brings much of this evil ideology into the minds of young people who are spending hours and hours behind their screens.
It is.
Yeah, look, I've certainly watched throughout the course of the lockdown. I mean, most of the anti-lockdown people have developed some spaces that are very, very amenable to the handful of Nazis. At the outset, it was only a handful who would sit in there all fucking day trying to red pill people or to JQ pill them. What does that mean? That means Jewish question pilling them. I mean, like, sit there and introduce newbies to the idea that it's the Jews what done it. Done what? Oh, done everything, really. There's no one as dedicated as a neo-Nazi loser constantly at home on the very long-term project of pilling a great deal of people so that they believe in the, you know, that they accept that it's the Jews what done it. And I've been watching them do so for a very, very long time.
Illegal in Germany. The Nazis are an illegal group, so all of their symbols, all of their sayings, it's all forbidden. Having them walking through town and being able to do that, to carry a swastika flag, and it's legal, that's just, I don't understand.
Well, there's been a disturbing development in this story. A short time ago, Thomas Sewell, the extremist leader featured in our report, arrived at Channel 9 in Melbourne with one of his cronies. The pair demanded to see a current affairs staff. While they were being escorted from the building, a Channel 9 security guard was attacked and punched multiple times by Thomas Sewell. The pair then ran from the station. Victoria Police have been handed CCTV vision of the attack. Our security guard was taken to hospital by ambulance.
All right, so here we are. So because Tom Sewell recognised the normie whispering factor of a current affair. He was probably quite frustrated that they were just calling him terrorists and wouldn't let him on board. And he said something to like, interview me, you cowards. Which I thought he would leave it there, but he didn't. He went to the office, which is strange to me because one of the things that Tom Sewell said that he was going to do related to the creation of, stopping the whole rally stuff in the wake of the Patriot movement, saying this, this stunt shit isn't getting us anywhere, and just focusing inwardly on slow gradual recruitment of young white-pilled neo-Nazi kids that he could groom, and creating, white gym spaces and what have you. One of the things he said he was going to do is he was going to move away from that showy stunt shit because it wasn't getting anyone anywhere. And what he used to do before that point, before the Lad Society stuff, now whatever it is, National Socialist Network, is he used to go out with Blair Cottrell and do all these silly fucking stunts. Wouldn't get anyone anywhere, but would certainly get on the telly sometimes. And it seems to me that in his frustration and his haste to try and get ahead of their normie whispering anti-Nazi piece, which I didn't mind it that much. It didn't commit many of the sins that these kind of pieces usually commit, and it was it was a little bit satisfying to see that even a normie whispering program like A Current Affair can put together something like that. It was a bit lurid, of course, but that's within their nature. The thing is, it wasn't actually that bad, and it treated people like Tom Sewell with the seriousness, the gravity that I think the situation needs to be treated with. So he reverted back to his old tricks. He went and did something, and this is something that he would have done with Blair Cottrell in 2016. And I find that odd, and I think it also shows that he was frustrated and he was acting a little bit out of step with his longer term plans. Because the question you have to ask yourself is, mate, if your plan is about gradually recruiting, using stunts, yeah, but non-violently recruiting, using shock stunts through the media, why are you in such a fucking hurry right now? You went on that walk, situated not too long after the January 6th Capitol riots in the US. Everyone was talking about wanting to prescribe a bunch of groups, Proud Boys or whatever, all these guys as terrorist orgs. And he knew that was the situation he faced. So you have to kind of be careful. What we're about to watch here is not necessarily careful. And in fact, as we're going to see, if you know what you're looking for, you'll see that Tom Sewell loses his cool. Let's go.
We're inside the reception of the Channel 9 whatever. And Channel 9 wants the Current Affair show to be on television tonight. Current Affair are on a show about us being terrorists. Our organisation advocating for white people in this country as being terrorists. They've interviewed many people to discuss us, but they haven't given us the right reply. They didn't contact.
Big relief to me to see that they didn't give these pieces of shit the right reply. They're getting it right. They're paying attention. This is the kind of thing we would have been rapping them on the knuckles for years prior. But there you have it. They didn't speak to these people because they know that they're fundamentally. They've obviously listened to people saying, these guys are fundamentally disingenuous. They do have it within their capacity to summon up the violence to commit a terrorist stunt. They'll probably get there eventually. Don't talk to them. Good.
They're discussing us.
Tom Sewell thinks he's normal. It's just that he's not the best judge of that. You know what I mean?
Reception to try to speak to one of the editors or producers.
I know he thinks he's worth talking to. Like, Tom, I know you think you're worth talking to. I know you think you're just there for the, protection of the future of the white species in the face of this, overwhelmingly powerful Jewish evil cabal that's trying to bring about your destruction. I know you think all that is noble and normal, but you're not a good judge. You don't know how abnormal you and everyone underneath you are. That's why you can't be talked to. You can't be trusted, mate.
They're not interested in coming out and talking to us. These people that run those kind of shows are very interested in harassing people at their homes or workplaces. They're very good at intimidating people. They're very good at going to where people are to ask them what they have to say. They call this investigative journalism. But when anyone dares to investigate these people, they hide like cowards in their offices. So I'm here to...
Well, what he wanted was to get an interview with them. That's why he went up in there. He wanted to get an interview. He wanted to use this as a way he could use his own stunt to put their side of the story out.
You can chat with them in person, but they've decided to not come out. No one from Channel 9 has decided to come down and talk to me, but they will run the show tonight. But before they do, I'm going to upload this to make sure you guys can see it. That these people are cowards, they're vermin, they're rats, they hide in their offices. And we're here to confront them. We're not afraid.
We're here to confront them. I think that's relevant in light of what happens later.
These people are manipulating public opinion against any white person in this country that advocates for the white population.
Okay, now, the building security here made the decision to send one black security guard out to deal with two organised white supremacists. And the person holding the camera is young Jacob Hersand, who I said before runs the National Socialist Network, the youth recruitment wing of the European Australian movement. So you've got those two organisations hand in hand. So the leaders of both of those are both here. And if you look at Tom Sewell's Telegram channel, you'll find very, very anti-black rhetoric on there. No surprise, you know. They're all very violent, trained people. Tom Sewell has military training, he has security training, a lot of martial arts training, and you know they're adherents to a violent and anti-black ideology. So why the fuck did you send one black security guard? For a start, send out more. For another one, try not to make it a black person, hey.
Sorry, you can't film in the building, bro.
I
don't touch you. I don't touch you. You can't film in the building.
I'll film what I want, bro.
You can't film in the building. I'm telling you right now.
I'm filming.
Please leave the building. Okay? That means both of you.
Okay, so now this security guard is extremely patient and he tells them what they're meant to do 800 times. And listen to Tom Sewell's voice. This is someone, can I just ask you to think about this as you listen to what comes up? Think about someone who's such a control freak that he styles himself as the fascist leader who will groom a gaggle of 16-year-old boys just to have them living with him or in houses around him and believing in the same ideology as him to a T. To be that person, you have to be a fair bit of a control freak to a strange extent. So imagine that, plus being a white supremacist and being repeatedly told by a pretty firm, ardent black bloke to get the fuck out in the middle of your stunt. It's frustrating for him and you can hear it in his voice.
Right. I'm telling you straight up. Excuse yourself and get out the building.
This is the basic nature of how these people operate. So he's putting his hands on
Come on, let's go. Let's go, bro. Let's go. You gotta leave the building, bro.
No, we're not leaving until we're done.
Come on.
We'll be a couple minutes.
No, man.
Just walk away.
Look, bro, you can film. Go out and film, okay? Listen. Bro, listen.
He wants his stunt. He wants his fucking stunt. He doesn't want to get out of the building. Leave me alone so I can do my fucking video stunt.
So
this is trespassing, okay?
They're not worried about removing me.
This is trespassing, alright?
They're not worried about removing me. What they're worried about is the filming.
Seriously.
They're worried about footage going out.
Seriously, I'm telling you right now, bro. Leave the building. Okay?
Get your hands off the camera.
Alright? I'm telling you right now.
Get your hands off the camera.
Very calm security guard repeatedly saying, get out. Tom Sewell is trying to reverse the situation into saying, get your hands off my camera. Basically reversing and issuing the threat. This is someone with a lot of security experience himself. Doesn't like being told what to do. Prefers to be in the position of issuing the orders.
Alright? Leave the building. Alright?
Get your hands off the camera.
Mate, I'm not touching you.
Get your hands off. You're touching our property. That's my problem.
Alright?
Get your hands
I'm asking both of you to
Get your hands off the
leave.
camera. Okay, we'll leave. Get your hands off the camera. We'll film at the front, but get your hands off the
Go
camera.
outside and film.
Get your hands off the camera.
Alright? Go outside and film.
Get your hands off the camera.
I'm not gonna say it again. Go outside and film.
Get your hands off the camera.
Alright?
That's our property. Get your hands off. That's our property.
Well, I'm telling you right now.
That's our property.
You adhere to what I'm saying.
Yes, we will go
you
outside.
and
We'll film outside.
Alright?
We'll film outside.
Alright, leave. Come on, both of you.
You're walking outside.
Oh, so they've agreed now. They've agreed eventually. That security guard was very, very firm. Repeated his orders again and again. Tom Sewell not happy. But you go on edge. They've had to agree to what this bloke's told them to do. Didn't like it. Didn't like it. Wasn't what he wanted to do.
Security has decided to forcibly remove us and try and touch our property. He's coming out again.
That's it, bro. Pass the adrenaline line. You feel me? Pass the adrenaline line. I don't care what you do.
Which line's that?
Pass that adrenaline line right up there. That white line, you can go up there and film. Not you. Alright?
Yeah, so now exactly.
Dance, monkey, dance.
So Jacob Herson has said to the black man, dance, monkey, dance. So Jacob's put this bloke in a position where he said something frustrating to him and the guy has tried to push him away. And I mean, really, this is after 800 requests to get the fuck out, so, you know, pushing him over that boundary is really not the end of the world. But Tom Sewell was already ready to snap because he didn't like being cucked the way he was being cucked inside there, you know. So watch what he does now.
Watch yourself. Watch
You fucking touch me.
Surprise attack by Tom Sewell.
Get the fuck away. Guys, get away.
Alright, you put your hands on him. Back off.
That's right, guys. Just go back that way.
Back off. Just go back that way. You can't put your hands on him. You're fucking the wrong person.
I said to you earlier that Tom Sewell's whole plan is to use the media to create shocking stunts and recruit a lot of young lads before it's too late and the government prescribes them as a terrorist org and they've only got very small numbers. You know, what he knows is that the intelligence services and such treat you very differently if you have 1,000 people to if you have 10 or 100, okay? So he's in a race against time to recruit more people without violence, because violence will give the government more grounds to take more swift and decisive action to destabilise his network of young, groomed 16-year-old boys and to interrupt his non-violent plans. That's what I'm telling you is Tom Sewell's stated plan for how he wanted to approach this, for how he wants to expand his network. So doing this is precisely, completely against. It's the polar opposite of what he wanted to do. Now, all of the neo-Nazi networks are really, really excited about this action. They're pumped as fuck about it. They're all going, oh, this is a memeable moment. Shit, man. Look at this one. This is when you have 16-year-olds in charge of making your memes for you. I heard one of them say yesterday, he goes, oh, I think we've got our Richard Spencer moment for the right. You know, so they all really want to, they just want to see someone that they like do a bit of violence. And then they want to see, you know, then they want to sit there and make up whatever, you know, sort of flimsy justification that they can muster up for why he had to do that. But he just fucked up his own plans when he did this. He knows what this means in terms of increased government scrutiny. He just went ahead and did it anyway. Because he lost his shit. He didn't like being told what to do. As I said earlier, he shouldn't even have been doing this stunt in the first place. He had changed away from wanting to do this kind of thing. But you see, when he loses his cool, he defers back without any other leadership because he's lost Blair Cottrell, he's lost, you know, he's ditched all that stuff. Now he's the Führer, you know. But he didn't have any leadership. And in times of not having any better answers as to how to deal with this scrutiny from the normie whisperers at A Current Affair, he defaulted back to this 2016 era. Let's do a Cottrell stunt. But you see, my real concern when it comes to Tom Sewell and his plans is, you know, what he said back in the wake of Brent and Tarrant. And I mentioned this earlier in the video, that if they're not allowed to do They're peaceful strategies of setting up white gym spaces and white enclaves for him to be able to groom young 16-year-old boys in. If he's not allowed to do that, then he basically, he implied he would go the path of Brenton Tarrant. Well, this is his non-violence. This is what non-violence, according to Tom Sewell, looks like. And as he's just fucked himself here, I imagine things aren't going to go so well for him and his group regarding, counter-terrorism, the court proceedings for this, what will happen to him coming out of that and his group. So what are these young, pill-to-the-gills young 16-year-old kooks that he's amassed under his fascist leadership? What are they going to do? Are they going to do the Brenton Tarrant style thing? This is the fucking problem with these cunts. You let them organise, they indoctrinate a bunch of children into a violent fascist fucking power conspiracy in which they're convinced that there's a bunch of fucking Jews coming to take everything away from them, and that all they, if they could just build peacefully, then... But they all laud violence. So what they really want to see is Tom Sewell go like that into someone's face. And then he goes and does it. They lose all their opportunities. It's all his fucking fault. But then they're going to be the ones to say, okay, we're all out of other opportunities. The government have denied us any other avenues. Now we're going to go and be violent. You see how this doesn't really end any other way? So he's fucked himself here a bit. How much? Who knows, They all think he's made a cool, memeable moment, but they're all fucking morons. They don't have his best interest or his group's best interest or anything at heart. They're all just a bunch of fucking losers hoping that someone who's white and who agrees with them about how they're victims of Jews will hit someone. That's all they want to see, But I don't feel any sense of victory in this, not only because I'm fucking... feel bad for that poor bloody security guard, but mostly because I'm worried about what those kids are going to do. And all I can continue to do is fucking let people know. For now, that's all we can do. I have a video upcoming, it'll be out eventually, and it'll be about the history of Lad Society, Tom Sewell, National Socialist Movement and stuff. That'll be coming out soon. It'll be a bit more professional, this little reaction video. So that will be my way, a little bit more formally, in which I will let you know what it is that these people are up to. But in the meanwhile, stay tuned. Keep paying attention to my presence online, as well as that of Slack Bastard, the White Rose Society, Jews Against Fascism. I'm hoping that we can start to reveal a little bit more about these people, like the suburb that they're all gathering together in. Remember, as I said, Tom Sewell wants everyone in a white enclave scenario, and he's trying to get everyone to all gather together in a particular suburb. So hopefully we can dip into what that is eventually, and a bit more about some of his plans. And also follow what it is that happens in terms of the legal fallout from this. Let's all just pray for now that some of the young pill-to-the-kills kooks in his movement don't decide that this is their time to do something, because what they think is the right thing to do is fucking ridiculous.